The HOA president declared war on my farm, leading a midnight raid against my illegal merchandise. She had no idea her absurd crusade was about to walk straight into a police sting, exposing a criminal enterprise far closer to home. The smell of fresh hay and damp earth is my alarm clock. It's the smell of my life, my legacy. My family has worked this 100-acre plot of land for 4 generations, long before the soulless, beige McMansions of the estates at Whisperwind Creek ever broke ground on the adjacent property. We were here first, a fact that was a constant burning thorn in the side of the self-appointed queen of Whisperwind Creek, Brenda. Brenda was the head of the Homeowners Association, and she ruled her kingdom of manicured lawns and identical mailboxes with an iron fist and a clipboard. My farm, with its charmingly rusted tractor, its gloriously noisy rooster, and the very real, very organic smell of manure, was an affront to her entire existence. Our properties shared a long fence line, a border she treated like the frontier of a hostile nation. It started small. A crisply folded note left on my gate, written in an aggressive, perfectly spaced font, complaining about my rooster, Bartholomew, crowing at 5 a.m. "This is a disturbance of the peace," it read. I politely informed her that roosters, on a farm, tend to do that. The next week it was the noxious odor from the cow pasture. I sent her a gift basket with fresh milk and cheese. She sent it back with another note about health code violations. Her campaign of harassment escalated with a terrifying surgical precision. She'd take pictures of my property from over the fence with a long-lens camera, documenting every perceived infraction. A pile of firewood was a fire hazard. My old Ford F-150 parked near the barn was an inoperable vehicle. She even filed a complaint with the county that my scarecrow was indecent because its shirt was unbuttoned. The county clerk literally laughed when she told me about it. I did everything by the book. I showed her the property deeds, the zoning laws that clearly marked my land as agricultural, and the legal precedent protecting farms from nuisance complaints from new developments. It was like trying to explain quantum physics to a house cat. She'd just narrow her eyes, purse her lips, and say, "The HOA bylaws supersede any outdated local ordinances." The real breaking point came when I set up my produce stand by the main road. It was a simple, rustic table with an honor box, selling the extra corn, tomatoes, and zucchini from my garden. To Brenda, this was a declaration of war. It was an unlicensed commercial enterprise, bringing undesirable elements to the pristine entrance of her suburban utopia. She sent me a formal, certified letter. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive legalese, clearly written by some cut-rate lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. It demanded I cease and desist all commercial activity immediately. The final paragraph was the one that made my blood run cold. It stated that if I failed to comply within 48 hours, the HOA would employ contracted security services to abate the nuisance and remove any and all offending materials from the premises at the owner's expense. She was threatening to send people onto my property to take my stuff, my private property. Now, what Brenda didn't know was that I had been having another, completely separate problem. Over the past few months, a string of thefts had plagued the rural properties in our area. High-end tools, a small generator, even a quad bike had been stolen from my neighbors. 2 weeks ago, someone had cut the lock on my main workshop and made off with a brand-new welding kit and a set of chainsaws. I'd filed a police report, and a sharp, no-nonsense detective named Miller had been assigned to the case. He suspected it was an organized ring that scouted properties during the day and hit them at night. He had a theory they were using the Whisperwind Creek development as a base of operations, blending in with the dozens of contractors and lawn care crews that came and went every day. He'd asked if I'd be willing to help with a little sting operation. Of course I agreed. He'd had me install new high-tech, motion-activated cameras around my barn and workshop, all feeding directly to a secure police server. So, when I received Brenda's letter, my first call wasn't to a lawyer. It was to Detective Miller. I read him the letter over the phone. There was a long pause, and then I heard him chuckle. "Oh, this is beautiful," he said. "This is just perfect. Don't do a thing. Let her make her move. We'll be ready." He told me his team was planning to move in on the thieves that very night, and this could be the perfect distraction. His instructions were simple. Act normal. If they show up, let them come onto the property. Just make sure your barn doors are unlocked. The 48-hour deadline passed in a tense silence. The sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and purple. I sat on my porch, sipping a cold beer, trying to look as relaxed as possible while my heart hammered against my ribs. Right on cue, just as dusk was settling in, a vehicle turned onto my long gravel driveway. It wasn't a police car. It was a glorified golf cart with a flashing amber light on top, the kind mall cops use. The logo on the side read, Whisperwind Creek Security. Two men in ill-fitting beige uniforms got out. One was built like a refrigerator, the other was weedy and nervous. They stood there looking at my farmhouse, clearly out of their element. Then a second golf cart, a much fancier chrome-plated chariot, pulled up behind them. Brenda got out. She was wearing a tactical-looking vest over her polo shirt and holding a bullhorn. She marched up to her two officers, a look of triumphant fury on her face. She didn't see me on the porch. She just raised the bullhorn, its electronic squeal cutting through the quiet evening air, and pointed directly at my big red barn. "That's the target," she shrieked, her voice echoing across the pasture. "The illegal merchandise is in there. Seize everything." The two guards, whom I mentally dubbed Fridge and Weedy, exchanged a nervous glance. Raiding a farm in the dead of night probably wasn't in their job description, which I imagined mostly consisted of ticketing minivans for parking on the street for more than an hour. Fridge squared his considerable shoulders and took a hesitant step forward, his hand hovering uncertainly over the maglite on his belt. "Get a move on," Brenda squawked through the bullhorn, making both men jump. "The evidence is in there. Confiscate all of it. We'll bill him for the disposal fees." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my beer, making sure the motion-activated floodlight above my porch stayed off. Detective Miller had been very specific. Do not engage. Let them walk into it. The camera hidden in the birdhouse on the porch post was capturing every ridiculous moment in glorious high definition. Brenda, fed up with her minion's cowardice, stormed past them. She marched right up to the massive sliding doors of my barn, and, with a grunt of effort, heaved one of them open. It slid along its track with a low rumble that echoed in the night. She flicked on a powerful flashlight, its beam cutting through the dusty darkness and illuminating motes of hay floating in the air. The faint, sweet smell of silage drifted out. "See?" she called back to her goons. "Nothing to be afraid of. It's just a dirty barn." She stepped inside, followed by the shuffling guards, their flashlights waving around nervously like they were in a horror movie. From my vantage point, I could see their beams dancing over stacks of hay bales. A stall with my prize-winning Holstein, Daisy, who just blinked at them placidly, and in the corner, my humble pile of unsold corn and zucchini. "There!" Brenda's voice boomed from inside the barn. "The contraband! Bag it up!" Just as Weedy was fumbling with a large garbage bag he'd produced from his pocket, I heard another sound. It was faint at first, but distinct. The crunch of tires on gravel, much heavier than a golf cart. But this vehicle wasn't coming up my main driveway. It was using the old, overgrown access road that ran along the far side of the property, the one that led directly to my workshop. A moment later, a dark, windowless cargo van rolled to a stop in the shadows behind a row of pine trees. Its engine and lights cut out, plunging it into near-total invisibility. My heart hammered. This was it. This was them. Two figures slipped out of the van. They were dressed in black hoodies and jeans, moving with a silent, practiced efficiency that Brenda's rent-a-cops could only dream of. One of them was carrying a heavy-duty set of bolt cutters. They weren't here for zucchini. They moved swiftly and silently toward my big workshop, the one that housed my new generator, my best tools, and my father's antique welder. The very building that had been robbed 2 weeks ago. Inside the barn, Brenda was directing her team like a Hollywood director. "Not like that, you idiot. Don't bruise the evidence," she hissed. Fridge accidentally knocked over a metal bucket, which clattered loudly on the concrete floor. The sound froze the two figures outside the workshop. They snapped their heads toward the barn, the source of the noise. They saw the open door, the beams of light sweeping around inside. They saw the silhouettes of people moving. I saw one of them whisper to the other, pointing. They thought the barn was the target. They thought Brenda's crew were rival thieves hitting the same score. The man with the bolt cutters gave a sharp, angry gesture, and they changed course, abandoning the workshop and creeping toward the open barn door instead. They flattened themselves against the wall, preparing to confront whoever was on their turf. This was going to go bad, fast. Brenda, completely oblivious, stepped out of the barn, holding a prize-winning zucchini like it was a confiscated drug shipment. "Phase 1 complete," she announced to the empty night. "Now, for the—" She never finished her sentence. The two thieves chose that exact moment to make their move. They burst from the shadows, one tackling Fridge and sending him crashing into a hay bale with a surprised grunt. The other, the one with the bolt cutters, swung them in a low arc, tripping the panicked Weedy, who went down in a heap. Brenda screamed, a high-pitched, genuine shriek of terror this time. She dropped the zucchini. The thief with the bolt cutters turned on her, his face a mask of fury in the dim light. "Who the hell are you?" he snarled. "You cops?" Brenda's brain seemed to short-circuit. Her HOA-programmed instincts took over her survival instincts. She drew herself up to her full height, her face contorted with indignation. "I am the president of the Whisperwind Creek Homeowners Association," she declared, pointing a trembling finger at the criminal. "You are trespassing, and I order you to vacate the premises immediately." The thief just stared at her, utterly bewildered by her stupidity. He took a menacing step forward, raising the bolt cutters, and then the night exploded. Brilliant, blinding floodlights erupted from every direction, turning the farmyard into a sun-drenched movie set. A powerful voice boomed from a hidden loudspeaker. "Police! Nobody move! You are surrounded!" From behind the woodpile, from the hayloft, from the shadows of the house, a dozen heavily armed officers in tactical gear swarmed into the yard, their weapons trained on the scene. The two thieves immediately threw their hands in the air. Fridge and Weedy were whimpering on the ground. And Brenda was frozen, her mouth agape, blinking in the sudden, overwhelming light. Detective Miller stepped out from behind my tractor, his face grim. He surveyed the scene. 2 professional thieves, 2 terrified mall cops, and 1 HOA Karen holding a zucchini. As his officers cuffed the real criminals, Miller walked over to one of them, a lanky man with a nasty-looking scar on his cheek. He leaned in close. "You know, Rick," Miller said, his voice calm but laced with steel, "we almost missed you tonight. We were expecting you to hit the workshop. What made you change your mind and go for the barn?" The thief, Rick, looked from Miller to his partner, then let his eyes drift over to the stunned, shivering form of Brenda. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. He looked directly at Brenda, who flinched as if he'd struck her. "Change of plans," Rick said, his voice dripping with malice. "Her old man was supposed to text us when the coast was clear." The silence that followed Rick's statement was so profound I could hear Daisy the cow chewing her cud in the barn. Every single person in the yard cops, criminals, and mall cops alike turned to stare at Brenda. Her face, already pale from the floodlights, went completely white, as if every drop of blood had been drained from it. The tactical vest suddenly looked absurd, a hollow costume on a woman whose entire world had just imploded. "Her old man?" Detective Miller repeated, his voice dangerously soft. He slowly straightened up, his eyes never leaving Brenda's. It was the look of a predator that had just cornered its prey. He didn't need to shout. The weight of the accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no sound came out. Her carefully constructed facade of suburban authority shattered into a million pieces. This wasn't a zoning violation or an unsightly scarecrow anymore. This was a police sting. This was conspiracy. This was prison time. Rick, the thief, seemed to enjoy the chaos he'd unleashed. "Yeah, Bob," he spat, looking at Miller. "Brenda's husband. He works for that fancy lawn care company that does all the houses in the development. He's been our inside man for months, scopes out the rich houses, tells us who's on vacation, points out the rural places with good stuff to take, like this one. He's the one who told us about the new generator in the workshop." Suddenly all the pieces clicked into place for me. The seemingly random string of thefts, the focus on high-end equipment, the thieves' uncanny knowledge of which properties were empty and when. Bob, Brenda's meek, perpetually browbeaten husband, who was always puttering around the neighborhood in his green lawn care truck, was the mastermind. Detective Miller nodded slowly, a grim understanding dawning on his face. He spoke into his radio, his voice crisp and clear. "Unit 3, we have a new person of interest. Robert." He paused. Looking at Brenda for a last name she was now too catatonic to provide. A quick search on his phone filled in the blank. "Robert Peterson. Address is 12 Whisperwind Lane. Secure the residence. He's a flight risk." At the mention of her husband's name, Brenda finally found her voice. It was a pathetic, wavering squeak. No, he wouldn't. I was just... the zucchini," she stammered, gesturing vaguely at the fallen vegetable on the ground. "Ma'am," Miller said, turning his full attention to her. He walked over and calmly took the bullhorn from her limp grasp. "You organized an unauthorized raid on private property using fraudulent security personnel. You trespassed. You attempted to seize property that wasn't yours, and in doing so, you and your employees directly interfered with a major felony investigation and nearly got yourselves seriously hurt. At best, you're looking at a mountain of civil suits. At worst," he let the word hang in the air, "you're an accessory." One of the other officers gently escorted Brenda to the side, where she collapsed onto a hay bale, her face in her hands, her polo shirt now covered in dust and shame. Fridge and Weedy were being questioned, both of them talking a mile a minute, throwing Brenda under the bus so fast it was a miracle they didn't get whiplash. They were just hourly schmucks who had been ordered by their boss's wife to go grab some vegetables. The fallout was spectacular. Bob was arrested at their house, caught with a bag packed and a one-way bus ticket to Mexico. It turned out he'd been siphoning money from the lawn care company and had gotten in deep with some very bad people. The thefts were his way of paying off his debts. His text to the thieves that night was supposed to be the all clear, but he'd sent it before seeing Brenda load up her security force for her own little crusade. He'd inadvertently sent the thieves to the exact same place at the exact same time as his wife's ridiculous raid. It was a perfect storm of idiocy and criminality. The Whisperwind Creek HOA imploded when the news broke that the president's husband was the ringleader of a local theft syndicate, and that she herself had been arrested for her stunt on my farm. The entire neighborhood went into a frenzy. There were emergency meetings, resignations, and lawsuits. My phone rang off the hook with calls from reporters and even some of my neighbors from the development, offering sheepish apologies and, in one case, a very expensive bottle of whiskey. Brenda and Bob lost everything. Their house, their reputation, their freedom. Brenda avoided jail time but was slapped with a massive fine, years of probation, and a restraining order that forbade her from coming within 500 feet of my property line. The HOA was forced to pay for damages, mostly to Fridge's ego, and all my legal fees. A few weeks later, I was out by the road, setting up my produce stand for the day. A shiny new sedan pulled over, and a woman I recognized from the development got out. She smiled warmly. "I'll take 3 of those big tomatoes," she said, dropping a 20 in the honor box. "And by the way, thank you. You have no idea how quiet it's been around here lately." I smiled back. The sun was warm. My rooster Bartholomew crowed proudly from the barn, and the air smelled of fresh hay and damp earth. The smell of peace. And the best part? From my little stand, I had a perfect, unobstructed view down the road. I could see the entrance to the estates at Whisperwind Creek, where the sign no longer mentioned anything about an HOA. It just looked like a normal neighborhood now, and that was a victory sweeter than any homegrown tomato.